Hey everyone, Cody from Mac Telecom Networks. In this video, we're going to do another small business setup. I did a video for this back last year in September, and people are asking me to do with the new version of Unifi. So we're going to be using a UDM Pro, and the version of UDM Pro we're going to be using is 1.93, and the version of Unifi we'll be using is 6.2.25. If you'd like to hire me for network consulting, visit www.mactelecomnetworks.com. You'd find us on Instagram at Mac Telecom Networks, and we have a Discord channel and Amazon storefronts, and I'll put the links in the description below. First, let's look at the devices that we're going to be using in this topology. So the first thing we're going to be using is our UDM Pro, which is going to be sitting at the top. And then our switch is going to be the USW24 Pro PoE. For access points, we're going to use the Unifi Flex HD, the In-Wall HD, and a Nano HD. For the connection between the UDM Pro and the switch, we're going to be using a DAC cable. Here I have a 0.5 meter DAC cable that I bought directly from Unifi, but you could also buy these on Amazon. If you don't have a DAC cable, you could just use a Cat6 cable between the UDM Pro and your switch. One thing I do suggest though is getting an SFP, and the reason for that is these 8 copper ports on the UDM Pro share a 1 gigabit backplane. Now let's take a look at the networks we're going to be creating. Our management network is going to be 192.168.10.1. Our staff network is going to be 192.168.20.1/24 on VLAN 20. Our guest network is going to be 192.168.30.1/24, VLAN 30. Our IoT will be 192.168.40.1/24 on VLAN 40. And then our cameras will be 192.168.50.1/24 on VLAN 50. We're going to limit our management network just to our network admins. So myself, one way we could lock it down, we could have a wireless SSID for our management network, and then we could specify which MAC addresses we want to allow to go into that network. We could also set up a radius server where we would have a username and password, and we'll do both options. On the diagram, you can see all these colors going between the switches and access points. Each color represents a different network. This is just one physical cable, but we're having 5 different networks going through it. So this is called a trunk port. By default on Unifi, all their ports are set to all. So every single port is a trunk port, and that's not great for security. So what we're going to do in this video, we create a port profile to only allow the networks that we want on those ports. Now we've seen how everything's going to be connected and the networks. Let's get the base UDM Pro configuration done. I'll give you a quick overview of how everything is connected. On the top, we have our USW Pro PoE 24 port switch. And right here is our 0.5 meter DAC cable. This DAC cable is connecting from the top SFP port to our bottom SFP port on our UDM Pro. The bottom SFP port is the only one that you could use to connect these two. The top one on the UDM Pro is for WAN. This blue cable, that is my ISP connection. And then we have all of our access points, and they're plugging in with these Ubiquiti patch cables. And I really like the Ubiquiti patch cables to plug access points in, as they have these bendable boots. Here you could see one patch cable from Ubiquiti, and we could bend it. And it just makes it a lot easier to get into the back of access points. We've seen how all the devices are connected, and our UDM Pro is plugged into the internet, but the reason why it's not connecting to the internet for me is because I have a static IP. Most people will have a DHCP address, and this should grab an IP right away. If you have a static IP or PPPoE, you need to go to Advanced Internet Options. And then on the advanced internet setup, we're going to select our connection type. I'm not using DHCP, I'm using a static IP address. And the interface that I'm using is our WAN. We could use our WAN 2, which is that SFP port. For static IP, we need to enter the IP address, the subnet mask, the gateway, and then our DNS servers. I'm going to go ahead and do that and then press next. I put in my static IP information, and now we're connected to the internet, so we'll press next. And this is asking us for a name for our UDM Pro. I'm going to call this UDM Test. We're going to agree to the terms and services and the end user license and press next. Now we have to sign in with our single sign-on by Ubiquiti. If you don't have one, you need to create one, and you could create the account under here. Or if you do have one, sign in with your email or username and your password. If you have 2-factor authentication turned on, you have to enter your 2FA token. If you don't, I'll show you how to enable that. Next, it's going to ask us our update schedule. The default frequency they have is daily at 12 a.m. I'm going to turn this off. as I like to do my updates manually. And then we'll press next. They do have this auto optimization feature on. I have noticed that it causes me more issues than good, so I'm going to turn it off, but you can leave it on. If you do notice some issues, we could turn it off in the settings. Now it's starting a speed test. And here are my test results. We're getting 867 megabits per second down and 58 megabits per second up. The package I pay for, I get a gig down and 60 up, so that's fairly close, and we'll press next. Now we need to review all our information and press finish. Before we go any further, I'm going to show you how to turn on two-factor authentication. So you need to go to account.ui.com and then sign in with your email, username, or password. Once you're into your account settings, we're going to want to go down to security, and then we could see that it has two-factor authentication. You need to download an authenticator app like Google Authenticator or Authy, and we'll enable two-factor authentication. And then we need to scan the QR code that's above. You won't be able to see that as I have it blurred out. But once we scan that, it will put a code in our Google Authenticator, and then we need to insert the token and press submit. At that time, it will turn on our 2FA. Now back to the Unifi Dream Machine Pro config. We can see that our network controller is sitting on 5.12.71. This is an older controller and we need to update it. So we're going to click on settings, and this first page here will show us our device, the owner of the device, the uptime, and then the firmware. This firmware is the firmware of the UDM Pro, and it's at 1.6.8, which is an older firmware. So we're going to check for update, and then it says update available. We're going to be updating from 1.6.8 to version 1.9.3 and press confirm. And this should update our Unifi controller as well. All right, our UDM Pro has upgraded to 1.9.3, and we can see we have a bunch of different controllers here. So we have our network controller that's sitting on 6.1.71, which we're going to upgrade that to the new firmware 6.2.25. Then we have Unifi Protect. This controller is for Unifi Protect cameras. We also have Unifi Access, which isn't set up right now. So to update the controllers, we need to go back into our settings, and then we need to select updates. From here, we could see a bunch of different information. We could see the UDM test. We could see the status that it's up to date, the firmware it's sitting on, which is 1.9.3, when it was last checked, and the release channel. And we're sitting on the official release channel. We could see under our network controller, there's an update available as well for our Protect. So I'm going to click on our network controller and press update. Now we could see that the network is upgrading, and we'll wait for that before we get into any of the configs. Unifi version 6.2.25 has updated successfully, and let's click on the controller. And here is the new user interface dashboard. On the left-hand side, we could see our WAN IP address in the gateway, as well as the version of the UDM Pro that is running. In the middle, we could see the uptime of the UDM Pro and the internet connection, and we're at 100%. This UDM Pro has only been running for 57 minutes. We could see real-time usage of our download and of our upload, and then we could run a speed test. On the right-hand pane, we could see the client devices that are connected to the UDM Pro. Right now, it's just my Windows PC. We could filter this down a little bit more by going to wired, wireless, or guest. And then they have a big advertisement in the bottom pane. On the left-hand side, we have our utilization, and it's showing us for the past 24 hours. We have our system uptime again, and then most active clients and most active apps. To get to other controllers that you have active on your UDM, we'll go up to these square dots, and then you could select which controller you want to use. On the left-hand side, the first setting we have is our dashboard, and then we have our topology. Below that, we have our devices, our clients, and then we have our statistics. Under statistics, we have insights, and then we have alerts and settings. So we have 3 access points and a switch connected to the UDM Pro. We need to get those adopted into our controller. So how we do that, we click on our devices, and you can see right now that the only light that is green is on the UDM Pro. All the rest are blue, meaning that they need to be adopted. So I'm going to click on the UAP Nano HD, and then we're going to press adopt. We're going to do the same thing for the 24 port switch and then the other 2 access points. Now all the devices are adopted into our controller. Some of them need a firmware upgrade. So we have our Nano HD that needs an upgrade, our switch, and our in-wall HD. So we're going to start by doing our switch as it may go down, and then we'll do our access points. So we'll press update available. And then it tells us the version it's on and the version it's moving to, and we'll press confirm. Now all of our devices are adopted in our UDM Pro. So what we need to first do is create some networks. If we look back at our diagram, our management network is on the 192.168.10.1. If we look in here, all of our devices are on 192.168.1.1. We need to switch that network to be 192.168.10.1. So how we do that, we go down to our settings wheel, and then we're going to want to select networks. Here it's going to show us the networks that are currently configured in the UDM Pro. Right now it's just the LAN, and the router it's using is the UDM Pro. We could use layer 3 switching as well. We could see our subnet, and then we could see the leases. Our internet type is WAN. So I'm going to click on this network, and then we're going to go to advanced. I'm going to scroll down, and then under gateway IP subnet, we're going to go 192.168.10.1/24, and then we're going to auto configure the DHCP range. After it's configured, we're going to press apply changes. So this is going to change all of our device IP addresses to reflect the new subnet. Now we can see after updating that LAN network that all our devices are in 192.168.10.x. So now we have to go back and create the other networks. We have 4 other networks to create: the staff, guest, IoT, and cameras. I'm going to show you how to create the staff and the guest, and then we're going to speed through the IoT and the cameras. So we'll go back to our UDM Pro, and then from here, we're going to click our settings wheel and then go to networks. We're going to add a new network. We're going to have this network enabled, and I'm going to call it staff. The router for this is going to be the UDM Pro. If you have a layer 3 switch, it will show up in here, and the USW Pro 24 PoE is layer 3, but we're not going to use that. We could see a few different options. We have VPN settings and content filtering. I have a couple videos already on VPNs, and I'll put links in the description below for that. To create the subnet, we're going to go to advanced, and then we want to specify a VLAN ID. Right now it's just chosen 2, but we want the staff to be on VLAN 20. Auto scale networks, we're going to turn this off. The DHCP mode will be DHCP server, and the gateway IP will be 192.168.20.1/24. And then we need to auto configure the network and press add network. Now let's create the guest network. I'm going to press add new network. We're going to enable the network, and I'll call it guest. The router is going to be our UDM Pro, and in the old classic version, there used to be a purpose. So you could have either corporate or you could have guest. If you chose guest, it would automatically create firewall rules for you. I can't find it here in the new settings. If you know where it is and if it's available, let me know in the comments below. This new UI is missing a few things. On the guest network, I'm going to enable content filtering. So we have a couple content filtering options. We have none. We have work, which blocks explicit, pornographic, and malicious domains. And then we have family, which adds everything that work does, plus blocks VPNs. I'm going to select the work content filter. Then we'll scroll down and hit advanced. We need to specify our VLAN ID. For the guest VLAN, it will be VLAN 30. And then turn auto scale off. The DHCP mode will be DHCP server, and the gateway will be 192.168.30.1/24. And then we're going to auto configure the DHCP range and press add network. So I'm going to create the other 2 networks very quick, as it's the same steps as we did before. Now all of our networks are created. The next step we need to do is create some Wi-Fi networks. So to create a Wi-Fi network, all we need to do is click on Wi-Fi. And they do have some tutorials on how to do this. I'm going to just press add new Wi-Fi network. The first network I'll create is our staff network. We're going to have it enabled, and the name will just be staff. We need to put in a password of 8 characters or more. I'll put test1234. And then the network is the VLAN or subnet that we want this Wi-Fi network to take. So right now it's sitting on LAN, but we want it to be on the staff network. So since it's on the staff network, whenever somebody connects to this Wi-Fi SSID, they're going to get an IP address at 192.168.20.x. If we click on advanced, we could choose which Wi-Fi band we want this SSID to be on. By default, it's set to both, but if you want it on the 5 gigahertz or just the 2.4 gigahertz, you can. Also, you could select which access points this SSID broadcasts to. Right now it's in the group all AP, so it's going to broadcast on all 3 of our access points. If we only wanted this to broadcast on 2, we could create a new AP group and we could call it staff. And then we could select which access points we want this to broadcast on. So if I want it to broadcast on the Nano HD and the in-wall HD, we just select those 2 and then create new group. Now we could see it's a part of both groups. So if we only wanted it to broadcast on those 2, we would deselect all APs and then we would only have it on the staff. I'm going to have it going over all 3 access points. Now if we scroll down, I'm going to keep everything else at default, and then we have this bandwidth profile. We'll create a bandwidth profile for our guests to limit how much bandwidth they could use. If we take a look under security, this is going to be our encryption. So we have WPA2, WPA2 Enterprise, WPA3, or WPA3 Enterprise, or we have WPA2, WPA3. We could hide our SSID, and then we have protect management frames. We're going to leave everything at default. We could do MAC address authorization. So we could have a MAC address filter list, or we could do radius MAC authentication. For this network, we're not going to be doing that for, but when I create a management network, I'll show you how to do that. And then below we have a Wi-Fi scheduler. So this is where we could specify what hours of each day we want the Wi-Fi to be on. And then if it's not falling in that time range, the Wi-Fi will be turned out. And that's it. I'm going to press add Wi-Fi network. Next, let's create our guest Wi-Fi. So I'm going to add a new Wi-Fi network. I'll call it guest. The password will be test1234. The network we're going to have is guest, and then we'll select advanced options. I'm going to have it on both Wi-Fi bands and broadcasting over all access points. We're going to have everything else left on default. The bandwidth profile will be default for now, but we're going to go ahead and create a new one to limit the guest bandwidth. I'll press add Wi-Fi network. Now to create a bandwidth profile, we need to go to advanced features. If we scroll down on advanced features, we're going to see the bandwidth profile, and we could add a new bandwidth profile. Here I'll call it guest. Then we have limit download bandwidth and limit upload bandwidth. I'm going to switch it to megabits per second. I'll give the guest a download bandwidth limit of 10 down and 2 up, and then we'll press apply changes. Now we have to go back to that guest Wi-Fi, click on the guest, and then press advanced. Scroll down, and then we'll select our bandwidth profile of guest and press apply changes. Now the guest will only be able to have 10 down and 2 up. Now let's create the management Wi-Fi. I'll press add new Wi-Fi network. We'll call it management, and then we'll give it a password of test1234. And the network the management one will be on is our LAN. That's our 192.168.10.x network. I'll click on advanced, and then we'll scroll down. Here we'll do our MAC authorization. So we're going to add a MAC address filter, and this will be an allow list. So whatever device we want to have on this network, we need to put their MAC address in the allow list. Another way to secure this Wi-Fi network is to add a radius server. So if we go to advanced features and scroll down, we'd see that we have a radius server at default. I'll click on the default radius server, and then we're going to enable it. Now we have to put in a radius secret. This radius secret is used between our switches and our access points, and you want to make sure it's a strong password. If we look under our radius settings, the authentication port is 1812, the accounting port is 1813, the interim update is 3600 seconds, and then we want to add our radius users. So we have no radius users in there right now. I'll create a new radius user, and then I'll give it the username of Cody. We'll put in a password, and then press create user. Now we need to go back and enable the radius on our Wi-Fi network. So I'll select my management network. I'll click on advanced, and then we'll go security. Under security, we're going to use WPA2 Enterprise or WPA3 Enterprise, and then press apply changes. Now we could see if the radius authentication is going to work. We could select our management Wi-Fi network and press connect. Now it says we need to enter a username and password. My username was Cody, and my password was test1234. And we'll press OK, and then we'll press connect. And as you can see, we're connected and secured to the management Wi-Fi network. The next thing we need to do is set up some firewall rules. By default within Unifi, inter VLAN routing is enabled. So the management network could talk to the guest network could talk to the management network, so on and so forth. To create firewall rules, we need to go to security, and then we need to click on internet threat management. And we'll get to internet threat management after we create our firewall rules. So I'm going to scroll down, and then we're going to go to firewall. Under our firewall, we could look at all rules. We could look at our internet, which would be for our WAN. We could look at our LAN, guest, internet v6, LAN v6, and guest v6. We're not going to be looking at anything under the v6. We'll be focusing on LAN. The first rule I'm going to create is to allow established and related. I'll click on create new rule. We're going to have that under the LAN in. And the description will be allow, establish, and related. We're going to enable this rule and we're going to accept the action, and the protocol is going to be all. We're going to click on advanced, and then we're going to match state established and match state related and press apply changes. Now if we look under the firewall rule on LAN, we could see the new firewall rule created. The next one we need to do is to drop invalid state. So we'll create new rule. It will be under our LAN in, and then it will be called drop invalid state. We're going to enable the rule, and our action is going to be drop. Scroll down to the bottom, select advanced, and then we're going to select match state invalid and press apply changes. Now we have to create a group for our RFC 1918, which is all the private IP addresses in IPv4. So if we scroll down a little bit, we could create a new group. The name I'm going to give this is RFC 1918. And the type is going to be a IPv4 address subnet. We're going to add an address of 192.168.0.0/16, another address of 172.16.0.0/12, and then one more address of 10.0.0.0/8 and press apply changes. So for our network, we want our management or our admins to be able to access everything, and then all the other networks to not be able to talk to any other networks besides its own in the internet. So we're going to create a new rule. The type will be under LAN in, and I'll say allow LAN to all. We're going to enable the rule, and it's going to be to accept. Our source is going to be a network of our LAN, and the destination is going to be an address or port group. The new address group we created, the RFC 1918, we're going to select that and press apply changes. Now we need to create a rule to block inter VLAN routing. So we're going to create new rule. It's going to be under LAN in, and then we're going to call it block inter VLAN routing. The rule is going to be enabled. The action will be drop, and our source is going to be the address port group of RFC 1918, and the destination is going to be RFC 1918. And we'll press apply changes. So with this rule in place, no one from the guest could reach our LAN network. Same with the camera network or IoT. They only could see their own subnet and reach out to the internet. If you had a guest that wanted to print on a printer that was on the LAN network, they wouldn't be able to because they were blocked. We would have to put an allow rule in. So I'll create new rule. We'll go under LAN in, and we'll allow guest to LAN printer. We're going to enable the rule, we're going to accept the action, and the source is going to be a network of guest, and the destination is going to be an IP address, and the IP address that we specify here is for the printer. I'm just going to make up an IP address and then press apply changes. As of right now, the guest still won't be able to print because the print rule is below the block inter VLAN routing. The firewall rules go top-down order. So we need to grab this allow guest to printer and drag it above the block rule. And now it will work. How the firewall rules stand right now, if I was on the guest network, I would still be able to get to any of the other network gateways. So I'd be able to get to the 192.168.20.1, 40.1 and 50.1, and that would direct us to our UDM Pro. We don't want that to be able to hit the UDM Pro interface. So we're going to create a new group, and I'll call it block guest to gateways. The type is going to be an IPv4 address subnet, and then we're going to want to add all the router interfaces besides the guest gateway. So if we look back at our diagram, we're going to want to add the 192.168.10.1, 20.1, 40.1, and 50.1. Now we have all the other gateways added to this group. We'll press apply changes. The group is created. We have to create a new firewall rule. So we'll create new rule. And this time the type is going to be LAN local. The description will be to block guest to gateways. We're going to enable the rule, and then the action is going to be to drop. The source is going to be a network of our guest. And the destination is going to be an address port group of the block guest to gateways, and we'll press apply changes. So now the guest can't get to the gateways of the other networks, but it could still get to its own. So we need to create another rule for that. First thing I'll do is create a new group, and I'll call it guest gateway. This is going to be the guest gateway IP. The type will be an IPv4 address, and I'll add the address of 192.168.30.1, which is the guest gateway, and I'll press apply. Since we can't block out the guest from hitting its own gateway, we need to block out HTTP, HTTPS, and SSH. We'll create a new group, and this group is going to be a port group, and I'll call it HTTP, HTTPS, and SSH. And then we're going to add the ports. So we'll add port 80, add port 443, and then port 22. And then press apply changes. We'll go back to our firewall and we'll create the firewall rule. It's going to be under our LAN local again. And then we'll give it a description. I'll call it block guest to HTTP. We're going to enable the rule. We're going to drop as the action. Our source is going to be the network of guest. And then our destination is going to be the address and port group of guest gateway, and then the port group of HTTP, HTTPS, and SSH. And then we'll apply the changes. So that's it for the basic firewall rules. You could get way more advanced, and I may do a more advanced tutorial in the future. Now our firewall rules are created. Let's go over some of the internet threat management. So I'm going to turn the internet threat management on, and then we have two different options. We could detect intrusions to my network that will just alert you, or we could automatically block network intrusions. That's the one I'm going to pick. Below that, we have system sensitivities. We have maximum performance, and then we have maximum protection. You could see under the customized threat management, when we're on level 1, we only have 8 of the 35 toggle switches turned on. If we go up to 5, we have all 35 turned on. I typically put mine on 3, and then I add the toggle switches as needed. And to save the threat management settings, we press apply changes. There's a couple other settings under the threat management. We could click on network scanners, and if we turn on the threat scanner, this is going to scan every device in our network and tell us which ports are open on those devices. We could also do the internal honeypot. So if we apply the honeypot to your network to detect malware, worms, and other types of malicious traffic, we could hit this toggle switch on, and then we could create honeypot. We could create a honeypot for all of our networks, and I advise you do that. In the left-hand pane, we have our threat management dashboard, so I'll click on the shield. On the overview, we could block certain countries. If I wanted to block Greenland, I could click on Greenland and press block. If I wanted to unblock them, I could hit the unblock button. Under traffic log, this is going to show you any threats that were detected. And then the endpoint scan, this is where it's going to scan our whole network and show us which ports on the devices are open. Under honeypot, this is where it would show us if something activated our honeypots. A couple of other things you need to know: if you're trying to cast from different VLANs, you need to turn on MDNS. To turn MDNS on, we'll click on Advanced Features, and then we'll click on Advanced Gateway Settings. Here under the Advanced Gateway Settings, we could find things like port forwarding, static routes, dynamic DNS, DHCP, UPnP, SNMP, and then finally we could find multicast DNS. To enable this, we just hit the toggle switch and then we press apply changes. Sometimes the MDNS doesn't work properly and we need to troubleshoot that, and I'm going to do a whole separate video on Unifi troubleshooting. Another thing that is good for security is to turn off all your ports that you aren't using. And to turn off the ports, we go over to ports on our switch and then we select the port. Under port profile, it's on all right now. We would want to press disabled and then apply changes. In the new UI, you can't select multiple ports to edit at once. In the classic version, you can. I hope that's a feature that they bring over. To set a port to a specific VLAN, we're going to want to click on ports And then say we wanted to have port 3 in our camera network. We'll click on port 3, we'll go to port profile, and we'll scroll down and we'll click cameras and press apply changes. Now when a camera or a device is plugged into that network, it will get an IP from the camera VLAN. Another thing to be aware of with Ubiquiti switches, every single port is set to all, which means it's a trunk port, and we don't want that. You want to have the ports on their specific LAN or VLAN. And for our access points and our links between our switches, we could create custom port profiles to have the VLANs that we need to connect to them. To create a custom port profile, we'll go to our settings, and then we'll click on advanced features. Here we could see switch ports, and these are all created by default. Every time you create a new network, it creates a switch port profile. I'm going to click add a port profile, and I'm going to call this trunk links. The PoE mode will have it on as PoE and PoE+. The native network will be our LAN, and then we're going to select our tag networks. So you could select whichever network you want. I want to have all of them on this profile, so we'll select all, and you could see all the networks have come into that. We don't have a voice VLAN, so we'll leave it at none, and then we'll press apply changes. Now if we go back to our devices, click on our switch and then go over to our ports, and then port 1 is an access point. I'm going to click on port 1, and then I'm going to select the new port profile of trunks, and then press apply changes. So the only VLANs that will be allowed down there are VLAN 10, 20, 30, 40, and 50. If we create another network, it won't be allowed down that link unless we add it to the port profile. So I know that was a long video, and there is probably things that I did miss. If you want to see anything else, please leave it in the comments below. If you have any questions about this video, leave it in the comments below, and I'll try my best to answer them. If you like this video, please hit the thumbs up button. If you're new here, please subscribe and hit the bell icon. All right, thanks.